Hello and welcome to Creative Sparkle. My name's Holly and today we're doing an art journal prompt list. So grab your art supplies and let's get crafting. Hello and thank you for joining me today. So working in a normal art journal today, which means you can prime it if you need to. You don't necessarily need to if you don't want to. But the first prompt is to prime the page with clear or white gesso. So if you do need to, I'm not necessarily in need of it on this journal. I just decided to do it because the paper's quite thin. So I'm using white gesso to prime, and then once that's finished and dry, we'll move on to prompt number 2, which is to ombre the page from the outside in to create the background. So I've chosen to go with walnut brown, chocolate brown and latte for the 3 colours that I've chosen to ombre. So I'm going to start with the darkest colour, which is the walnut brown, and go around the edges, and the chocolate brown will go on the inner edge of that, and then the latte colour will go around the middle. So I'm just painting around the edges and trying to blend the next colour in together. If you decide that you want to do different colours, you don't have to have the same colour ombreed. You could start with one colour and change it to another. It's completely up to you how you want to do it, but I just decided to go for the brown, and after blending it all, it does look a lot lighter than it is right now. So once we're happy with the ombre, we can move on to prompt number 3, which is to use a piece of material you've not yet used and add it to the page. So I have some cheesecloth that I have not yet used. I used some leftover ink to dye it brown in a previous project, so it's already brown. But if you wanted to start with the cheesecloth and dye it a different colour to add to your page, you can just do whatever you wish with your material. It doesn't have to be cheesecloth, just something you haven't used yet. And because I haven't used this yet, I thought it was a good idea to get that used. So I'm just trimming it and popping it over the page just to try and add some interest. And then I'm going to use Mod Podge to stick it down. So once you're happy with how your material looks, we'll move on to prompt number 4, which is to doodle on or around the material added. So I've chosen to use some vintage photo ink to do my doodling, and I'm just going to add a bit of colour to the piece of material that I've chosen to add, and then I'm going to use a cotton bud to add shading around those pieces to give them a shadow around the edges, and then we'll move on to the next prompt. Obviously, if you don't want to use ink, you could use a pen or charcoal, whatever fits with your page better. So moving on to prompt number 5, it is stamp text or pattern or add scribbles to the page. So my choice was to add text, and I have chosen a text stamp, and I'm using peacock feathers in Distress Oxide, as you can see here. I'm just going to randomly print it over the background. I thought the colours quite offset each other, so I thought they went quite well. So you can just scribble words, or if you don't have stamps, use whatever you have. So prompt number 6 is to add a focal image of your choice. So the focal image I've chosen is a postcard, and I have this collection of postcards that I got from a museum, and I decided to use this as my focal image because I thought it was quite vintagey looking, which went with the page quite well. And obviously you can see it is a previously used postcard, but I bought it from a museum, and I really enjoy looking at these postcards, so I thought it went with the page quite well. And it's got some gold outlining on it as well, so I thought it looked quite pretty. So prompt number 7 is to ground your focal image. So I've chosen to try and get with the same colours that I've used. So I'm using this stamp set that I just showed you, and I'm going to use some coloured card from this set and just trim it and use black soot to add some shading around there, so the colours are more cohesive with the focal image. And then I'm going to use the stamp, sticking it down with some sticky ink. So I'll show you that in a moment, and then I'll print that onto the piece of card that I have here. You don't have to go through the same process I have. This is just something that I thought would go with the page a bit better and go with the focal image a bit better. So if you preferred, you could stamp something directly onto the page, or you could use something like a tissue paper or some paper that you have available to you. Just ground your image with some washi tape perhaps. So with the sticky ink, I've used gold embossing powder. So after getting rid of the excess embossing powder, I'm going to heat it, and then I'm going to cut out the image that I've got in the embossing powder. So I'm not putting the full strip on, I'm going to fussy cut around the edges there. So I've just stuck that card down with some double-sided tape, and then once we're happy with the grounding of the focal image, move on to prompt number 8, which is to create or add a title linked to prompt 7. So in the way that it's linked, I have chosen to go with the colours that are linked, because the theme of the embossing powder on that card with the black soot I thought went really well. So I've decided to use this stamp set that I have, and then I'm going to add the word vintage and use embossing powder again, and just showing you here the heat embossing, that's the best part. And then I will cut that out and stick it onto the page with some foam tape like I did with the focal image. So once you're happy with the location of your title, we'll move on to prompt number 9, which is to add ephemera or interest cohesive with your page. So I'm using gel medium to add some charms to my page that I have as a gift. I received a number of charms, and they're all quite vintagey looking. So I've got this clock here, there's just multitude of things. So I wanted to add them to add some interest to the page, and I'll show you each one of them as I'm sticking them down. Obviously, if you prefer, you can use some ephemera. Charms can sometimes make your page a bit bulky, and I know not a lot of people like to put things like that in their book, but you just use whatever you have available that fits with your page best. So once we've got all this stuck down, I'll move on to the 10th and final prompt, which is to add a subtle border to finish. So I've chosen to use the peacock feathers in oxide ink again, like I did with the text on the background, and I'm just using a blending tool to go around the edges, and then that will be the page finished. So I'll put the full prompt list at the end of the video along with the finished photo results. If you do decide to take part in the prompt list, please do tag me on Instagram with the hashtag #sparkleprompts. I hope to see your creations. If you did like this video, please do give it a thumbs up, and I will see you next time, where we will turn your creative spark into a creative sparkle. Thanks. Bye.